Hi, my name is Kristen Danson. I live at 6801 Bright Star Lane. I also own the property next to me at 6805. I've been there for 16 years. I'm on 2.5 acres. My house, my last appraisal was approximately $650,000. At this point, I'm assuming my property is definitely going down. This past summer and fall, I have hardly been able to use my pool on the weekends, my grill, my gazebo, and my 2.5 acres, because all it is a bunch of noise coming into my backyard. Now, where a lot of people, because I'm on the most eastern side of Hill Country Estates, it is now in my home. The sound has continued to go up. I have been woken from my master bedroom because of the sound. It sounded like my alarm clock was going off. My office, which I primarily work from my house, when they're doing sound checks in the afternoons, is extremely disruptive in my home. And you know, I have 2 Great Danes. One of them will not even leave my porch to go outside because she's afraid that there's people in my backyard. That's how loud the sound is. So if this is a religious practice, my question is why is the city enabling this religious practice to be forced into my home? Because that's what this is. This is my home, and I've been there for 16 years. I'm asking you to please make this right.
All right, thank you.
Today. My involvement with the amphitheater began on February 25th, 2007, when I read an article in the Austin American-Statesman indicating Randy Phillips and Promised Land West Church were intending to build a dream city very close to my neighborhood. It went on to talk about the intent to have an outdoor amphitheater for concerts and other events, and also to build facilities for racquetball courts, basketball courts, and soccer fields and other matters that would be for community resources. The Statesman quoted Randy Phillips saying, "What I want to build is a community resource. What I want to build is a community resource. I didn't want to build a church." In 2007 and 2008, residents of my neighborhood, Covered Bridge, and other residents from nearby neighborhoods requested meetings with Randy Phillips and Promised Land West, now known as LifeAustin. And we met with them on several occasions and expressed a willingness to work with them. We offered to accept an indoor music venue, but what we couldn't agree to was what was then proposed as a 2,500-seat outdoor amphitheater with amplified music that was going to be a live music venue. Randy Phillips personally said that he hoped to have 8 events per month to be held at the outdoor amphitheater, which mounts to nearly 100 events per year. This is not religious assembly, and it doesn't matter that they're calling it religious assembly. That can be done indoors. This is about the outdoor assembly of people, and that is prohibited by the zoning code. Randy Phillips was also quoted in the Chronicle saying, "I know there's people who've moved out there expecting it to be a sleepy little place. I can see why they might be alarmed, but we're going to work hand in hand with the neighborhoods. We're not here to impose our will on others." He also added, "The community will love it." Well, for 8.5 years, neighborhoods and those surrounding the LifeAustin parcel and hundreds of city residents have told him that we do not love it. So on behalf of the appellants in this community, I respectfully request that you make this right and that you grant our appeals.
While Hill Country Estates is located to the west of the amphitheater, we are located to the east of the amphitheater. Our issues are similar to what Hill Country has. The noise, the music, the lights, the clapping and shouting now enters our homes whether we like it or not. The most recent concert this past Sunday was heard inside many, many homes in Covered Bridge, and I've received many complaints, reports that sound has upset families, children trying to sleep. It's intrusive to whatever we do. We didn't ask for this. In fact, as Paula said, we literally begged LifeAustin not to build this in our neighborhood. We trusted that the city officials would do the right thing and protect us. That's why we're here today. We didn't ask for this. In addition to the lack of due process and unwanted intrusion to our homes, I'd like to describe my community's greatest fear. The fear that people will not want to move to Covered Bridge and our housing values plummet. Recently, several of us visited another development, and when we shared with the real estate manager where we were from, the comment came back, "Oh, you're the ones with the amphitheater," meaning the word is out and has probably already affected our property values. This is grave concern to us. This is a travesty the city would permit and allow this to happen, and that the city would allow the amphitheater to run without sound permits and operate as any other residential dwelling. and that's how it's seen. It's a travesty that we've been fighting this for 7 years, and we're only now being heard. We are in no way opposed to religion, worship, or religious assembly, but we are opposed to amplified sound invading and degrading our lives, our neighborhood, and our home values. I have here 350 signed petitions of neighbors, people immediately in our neighborhood surrounding LifeAustin Amphitheater. I'd also like for those of you in support of the appeals to please quietly stand up, or if you're already standing up, please raise your hand. And you can see how many people are here from our community tonight. Please correct this tragedy. We ask you for your help. Thank you.
In an October 2008 meeting with residents of the area, LifeAustin presented their vision for what was then known as Dream City. It included components that were incompatible with the site's rural residential zoning, such as lit sports fields, a 6-story parking garage, and an amphitheater. LifeAustin, when asked why they bought a property whose zoning would not allow most of the components they were proposing, replied, because the price was right. LifeAustin knew that their site plan was not appropriate for the property, but they did not care. I was also the primary contact person for the neighbors, between the neighbors and the site plan case manager, Sarah Graham, throughout the site plan review process. After the site plan was approved, we received guidance from the city that a restrictive covenant agreement would be created to define the use of the amphitheater. We were actually assured by city staff that our fears and concerns would be allayed. The neighbors asked to be allowed to participate in the creation of the agreement. I sent the email myself. Our request was ignored, and the agreement was crafted between city staff and representatives of the church. As a result, the very parties needing protection were excluded from the process. And the resulting agreement actually expanded LifeAustin's use rights for the amphitheater by revising the state and the city's definition of religious assembly to include all manner of entertainment, activities typically viewed as commercial or civic in nature. Today, when neighbors call 311 to complain about the noise from the amphitheater, the city logs these complaints as loud commercial music. Well, that makes sense. If I brought big-name acts like the Gatlin Brothers to my backyard, charged people $40 a ticket, charged that for anyone who wanted to attend, and did this every weekend, well, the city would rightfully call my home a commercial venue. Well, it's time to recognize LifeAustin's amphitheater as a commercial venue too, especially since their house seats 1,500. Please approve our appeals of LifeAustin's site plan, the restrictive covenant agreement, and the building permit. Please make this right.
And I've spent the past 16 years there building my sanctuary on my wooded and wildlife-filled 10 acres of land. My property, like LifeAustin's, is zoned rural residential, and I respect the privileges and responsibilities such a designation means. Hearing the noise from the amphitheater myself and the outcry from neighbors motivated me to create the website lifeaustinnoise.org to help visualize and record the complaints created by the church's live concerts. Using Google Maps, it allows people to pin their location and specify a level of disturbance they've experienced. And you'll see on the handout the screenshot in the map of what it's collected so far. So it is my hope that this tool can give a voice to the neighbors not being heard here tonight. As you can see on the map, we can certainly hear LifeAustin outside of the two neighborhoods represented in the appeals. Thank you.
OHAN. That is an umbrella organization of different neighborhood associations and HOAs and POAs in Oak Hill. We have about 30 members, so we cover a lot of ground in Oak Hill. OHAN's advocacy on behalf of its member organizations includes adopting resolutions on matters of concern to our members. In this case, we've adopted 3 different resolutions regarding the LifeAustin Amphitheater going all the way back to 2008. All of these are in your backup material. As you can see from the resolutions and the quantity of the correspondence that you've received from individuals who've had their lives dramatically impacted by this outdoor assembly and amplified sound, this is not merely a local problem or a one HOA problem. This is a regional problem that affects numerous neighborhoods and numerous individuals, and not just the 5 individuals you've heard here tonight. The problem with the amphitheater that's shown in your backup materials is also consistent with what we at OHAN have experienced. It's a significant problem that has had a far greater impact than just a couple of people in a single neighborhood. The people affected by this have made probably what's the most significant investment of their entire lives in their home. And they are having that investment destroyed by having amplified sound outdoor assembly in residentially zoned areas. They shouldn't be subject to these unwanted intrusions into their home and into their seclusion. This use is simply incompatible with residential use, and we at OHAN would urge the board to grant all of the appeals.
My question is, why was the neighborhood not involved in the crafting of the restrictive covenant?
I could not say whether my staff was not influenced or not by what the neighborhood said.
I still feel like the neighborhood was left out of those discussions.
I don't believe that they were in a discussion where each word was negotiated.
One of their worship models, or one of their outreach models, is to reach people that might not come to church but would come to a concert, an outdoor entertainment, and through that they're able to then pull them into the fold and speak to them in a meaningful way. If the avenue for doing that was motocross, to reach the motocross crowd, who may or may not be church going, I don't know, or a NASCAR raceway with a band in the middle, would you consider that to be part of a church regardless of the nature of it?
I'm not sure that I could answer a question.
Owned by the church, used by the church as outreach.
Just because a facility is owned by a church does not mean that it qualifies as a religious assembly. An amphitheater building would be used for a religious assembly use. And that's what I relied on making my determination. And that's how the city approved the site plan and building permits that follow.
And I would agree with my colleague that an amphitheater, by definition, is not a building. But
out in the field.
In this case, but there is a threshold. You can see that there would be a threshold of use that you would probably not consider part of religious assembly, even though they might.
There might be a point where I would have to take a look at that. And that's, if AC/DC we start playing one weekend and Aerosmith the next, and they started basically turning a profit, and that would purely be in a music venue, then I would probably have a change of heart and say that that is not in accordance with being a religious assembly use. If it turned into to be something other than a religious assembly use, it was basically told to the city and we permitted.
So it's kind of the religious assembly use is the get out of jail free card for you.
It's how it complies with the code.
Right.
Okay.
So, Mr. Guernsey, real quick. So, but this is in a residential area. I mean, isn't there a red flag that goes up? I mean, it's the city that the problem that people have with the city is that the individual's rights seem to be constantly abridged.
The city has every right to regulate things like the decibel levels or the parking on site or whatever else. Like, just because it's a religious assembly doesn't mean that they have a de facto right to do anything and claim that it's worship, right? Clearly, regulating decibel levels is something that's within the scope. And I think that the council later on, following this issue, regulated the amphitheater issue. But we have to deal with the code prior to that. And I just don't see how, right now, what they're doing despite the nuisance doesn't meet the code that was in place at the time.
Well, Commissioner, also decibel level, even though the decibel level is low, in Vietnam, the Vietnamese, the Viet Cong used whistles to blow before they would come on. The whistle's not loud, but you could hear it. You could hear it down through the valley. Is that not right, sir? And it's just a whistle. So this, even though the decibel level, the point I'm trying to make is the reason the decibel level is being maybe measured and okay at the fence doesn't take into account how it carries, how sound actually carries. It doesn't have to be real loud to carry really far. So I think that's the problem we have with that.
Commissioner.
Okay, so I know there's more than one letter in exchange, and I'm not getting on you know, but there was an exchange to the church saying, hold off on this. We're in litigation. Wait a little bit. You know, if you proceed, you proceed on your own, at your own risk. And the church basically responded back to the neighborhood association saying, we're moving in a timely manner. That doesn't sound very brotherly to me. Okay?
With the neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't necessarily mean word by word, but the people that were going to be most impacted by the conditions that were being put on this site were going to be the neighborhood. And usually when that's the case, the restrictive covenant is something that's agreed to where at the end sometimes you split the baby, as people say. But that it comes to some sort of agreement on both sides, because there is a very large number of affected parties that live around this church that were going to be affected by this amphitheater, even if the use is allowed, even if the decibels are right. Usually a restrictive covenant is the tool that you bring peace with everybody. And I guess I'm used to seeing the neighborhoods more involved in restrictive covenants than we're involved in this. We usually don't see the applicant writing their own restrictive covenant.
And I don't believe the applicant wrote their own restricted covenant per se. I think that was something that's drafted by our law department, and it was one where this isn't a regular zoning case. There's not a zoning map change to change it from one district to another.
I understand your rationale. I understand the rationale for the subsequent modifications to the code to fix it or to make it right. I just think this is one of those cases that it's just bad from the get-go. I mean, it just seems to be profoundly abridging the bulk of the citizens' rights that are tax-paying citizens around this facility.
From my view, I believe that I agree with your assertion that you do have the authority to determine land use, and that's well within your rights as the director of the department. But I have trouble understanding how an email that wasn't made available to anyone could allow for an appeal that was also the right of the people to appeal it. So I think that the answer then is there wasn't a mechanism for them to know because there's no requirement to notice.
That's correct.
And so maybe that's why council later amended the code in order to create that, so it would fill in that due process gap.
Yes, I believe that to be.
Just one question for the church. Would y'all be willing to even consider enclosing the amphitheater and making it a theater? An ink building?
It'll only take one $250,000 fundraiser. Maybe two. Yeah.
The church is willing to.
You guys need to get together. I'd like to see a little more accommodation on the part of the church, frankly.